had to get creative about it. And it resulted in such a beautiful community of people from all over the place. And I think it really has, given me a lot of hope, because people from all different communities, really conservative communities and liberal communities and communities all across the world who are kind of having this moment of how do we step forward?
Welcome to New World Normal, the podcast, where every week we'll talk to guest experts, thought leaders, and everyday people who are disrupting norms and working to create a more inclusive and holistic society. We will talk about the issues that affect us all: environmental, human rights, social issues, criminal justice, education, and the economy. We'll talk about wellness and about food, from how it's cultivated and distributed to how it's prepared and consumed. Basically, we talk about all the systems in our society that aren't necessarily working for the benefit of the many. We'll strategize and collaborate on how we, as a collective, can intentionally make better choices every day that will lead to positive changes in the world around us. If that sounds good to you, stick around and have a listen. And by all means, click like or follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast source. Today we're speaking with Jen Bloomer, an artist, facilitator, and the founder of Radici Studios in San Francisco. For the past 2 decades, she has painted and taught art in Guatemala, India, Italy, Colorado, Eritrea, Thailand, Kenya, and California. Jen has a BA in Latin American Studies, a post-baccalaureate certificate in painting, and a master's degree in expressive arts therapy. She has created art with people aged 1 to 81, giving space for them to find their unique, creative voice in the world through the arts. Jen's own activist art can be seen in local murals, at marches for social justice across the country, and across social media. Her work has been shown internationally by Amplifier Art and is included in the Library of Congress archive. Jen is a white woman who is married to an Eritrean Italian man with whom she is raising mixed-race children. She believes that the intersection of creativity, connection, and community holds the answer to our personal and collective healing. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Jen has an art studio in San Francisco, Radici Studios?
That's right. Yep.
Yes. Which is how I found you, because I found a graphic on a group that I joined when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with this whole New World Normal thing. And that group on Facebook was called Create the Normal, or Create the New Normal. And they're kind of a homesteading group in the UK.
Oh, how interesting.
So I see a lot of interesting information being passed back and forth on that group. But they shared this graphic, and I was like, that is exactly how I've been feeling. And to let everybody know what the graphic says, it's a simple graphic of a tree or a plant that's been chopped off, and there's a little bit of regrowth, and it says, may we grow back not to what was, but instead towards what we can become. And I think it really encapsulates what I was feeling from the beginning, when everybody was so uncertain and so scared about this new normal. And I'm like, wait a minute, can't we take a little control over what it is and see some of the blessings that have come out of this craziness and try to move forward with those? So anyways, then that led me down to Google image search, which was the first time I used it. I'm like, okay, I'm techie. I can do this.
I love it.
And then I found you. And then I quickly learned about your series that you were doing about antiracism and the intersection of art and activism. And I thought that was such a beautiful use of your talents. I was hoping maybe you can share a little bit of what you learned through that process with the listeners.
Yeah. One of the things the pandemic did, because I have 2 young kids, is forced me to get really creative with how to still teach and lead classes, because I was teaching in-person classes up until then. So I learned how to put together a digital class and put my Raising Anti-Racist Kids Through Art class out into the world during the fall of 2020. Yeah. I have 2 young kids. So as a parent of a 4-year-old and 7-year-old, and both were biracial and husband who's Eritrean Italian, it feels like a lot of pieces of my world just started all combined, just my personal, our family and the values that we hold there. And then also, professionally, art has just been such a important part of my life. And I studied expressive arts therapy and just really felt like bringing all those pieces together was what my life passion is all about.
And I don't know how you felt, if you were able to connect with, it sounds like you had a pretty nice little following already in person, but were you able to connect with people from a broader range using the digital format and the Zoom classes?
Yes, I have to say, I have such a love-hate relationship with social media, but there is a lot of love too. Instagram has been such a powerful tool for me as a visual artist. It feels sometimes, besides all the complicated back algorithm stuff that I don't understand, but sometimes it feels like radio for visuals, where you just have an opportunity to put stuff out into the world and get feedback and get connected to other people out in the world. So yeah, I have found it so powerful to connect with people all across the country and all around the world, really. It was kind of funny because right before the pandemic hit, I had actually decided I had been doing a lot of my own art and putting it out there on Instagram, but I decided to start teaching, and I went really local. I was teaching, I rented out a space just down the street from us and just was posting around the neighborhood and connecting with neighbors and feeling a real sense of community there. And then all of a sudden I couldn't do that anymore. And so had to get creative about it. And it resulted in such a beautiful community of people from all over the place. And I think it really has, given me a lot of hope, because people from all different communities, really conservative communities and liberal communities and communities, all across, the world who are kind of having this moment of how do we step forward? What do I need to do? And I think it helps my own learning journey as well.
I love hearing you say that, the connecting of the different tribes and all that commonality, because I really believe we are more alike than different, and it contrary to what the media would like to portray us as. And I love the idea of building bridges, especially through art. And I feel the same way about social media, the love-hate. There was so much more of dis-ease with it at the beginning, like, oh gosh, this isn't good. Like, people are just arguing all the time. But then as I got more into it and connecting with people from, like you said, from all around the world, it's like, wow, there really is a powerful good side to this. If we could just harness that part of it and stop arguing with each other and listening more and connecting more, what a nice thing that would be. You said you're going to start some new classes coming up in September.
Yeah, so I'm leading the class Raising Anti-Racist Kids Through Art class again, which I've done a couple times now, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's such a beautiful community for me as well. And actually, I think the first cohort I worked with they've still kind of continued to meet on their own and continue to set up their own times to kind of facilitate and share. And so it's just such a beautiful kind of ripple effect of, you show up with what you have to offer, and other people do as well.
Because it's like we're on the same wavelength. That's what I've talked about, the ripple effect. If we all can just affect our little circle, and then those people it'll just all go out and make the world a better place. It sounds kind of cheesy and naive, but it really seems to be happening, because you hear more and more people talking about this forced pause, really taking inventory and focusing on what does really matter. And it's in that regard, it's been a blessing that I find the forced pause of it all to slow down. Your young kids, were they in school prior to the pandemic, or did you homeschool or?
Yeah, no, my son was in daycare and my daughter was in her first year of kindergarten. I think the good thing was that she didn't know any different. So I think they were excited to be home and have some time. They obviously miss being with their friends, but yeah, it was challenging. We have a small 900 square foot house, and my husband was suddenly at home. I always worked from home, so it sort of felt like everyone was in my workspace, and it was very challenging to get work done. And so I had to kind of reevaluate what it meant, because at the same time, it felt like so many people were craving visual arts and the arts in general, music. And so I felt, very inspired to connect with people and put what I had to offer out there. But it often meant that I was, working at midnight after the kids were asleep. But yeah, it was a challenging, and things have shifted and are a different iteration now, because both my kids are back in school. This is day 2 where they're both back in school. So that's been helpful. They had some care last year as well, but it's been a juggle for sure.
Definitely challenging. I know I've said multiple times when I've said, well, I've kind of enjoyed this past year. I'm like, but my kids are grown. So I definitely feel for the parents who have smaller ones at home. And I do believe that kids are super resilient, and it's just a year of their life, but still had to be challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And I think I really feel, I used to work with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and I really feel for kids that age who, social interactions are such a key component. Having little kids, I think they were excited to play with each other. And so, but yeah, as a parent, it was a big juggle to sit with, and try to figure out how to make things move forward.
This is kind of a little sidebar, but I just thought I watched on Netflix or Hulu the other night. It was called Homeroom, and it was a documentary about the class of 2020 in Oakland, which is near you. And it was a really interesting, they started filming it before the pandemic. So you already get to know the kids and then see how they had to react to what their reactions were to the lockdown and everything. It was really interesting and inspirational. I know a lot of people talk negatively about young kids these days, but I'm pretty inspired by a lot of them.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, they're leading the climate movement. They're leading all these important big movements. I feel equally inspired. It gives me hope.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
I wish more people saw that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you teach people to incorporate more art into their life, or do you teach them to? Or most people just crave to do it?
Honestly, I think a lot of people have a lot of fear around art. My experience is that there have been a lot of people who were told at some point in their childhood that they should just not even try, or that they didn't know how to do it right, or whether that's from a teacher or a parent or some adult in their life. So I really do feel like part of my life's mission is to get people creating and making things. I think everybody has creativity to offer, and I think we really need to uplift that and really expand the definition of what that means. Because painting a photorealistic apple, maybe that will get you a really cool gig somewhere, but that is not the only definition of creativity. And I know for me growing up, my art teachers in high school and stuff, that was a lot of the focus of like, learn how to draw this perfectly, And so I guess you can't see my on the radio, but yeah, I think that's been one of the things I've loved about the mural work I've done, because I've done a lot of community murals and getting people to participate who've never painted before, and really, allowing people to have moments where they get to experience their own creative voice is, I think, so huge. But I do think, back to your question, I think one of the biggest things is just normalizing how hard it can be and how vulnerable it can be, and how, so many people will say, I draw like a 6-year-old. And then you ask them the last time they sat down and drew a picture, and they say, oh, when I was 6. So, I think there's a lot of misperception on what it means to make art. And I think creating environments where people feel like there's space to explore, where they're not put on the spot to share what they make. I think doing Zoom classes is really helpful for that, because they have their own private space that they're doing. They don't have to show things. So I think ensuring that people feel safe in the group, in the class is a key part of that as well, because it's not easy to share, your creativity. That to me is an expression of who you are. And I think back to social media, we get taught to only show the shiny parts of ourselves, right? So it's I think such a fruitful way to get to know yourself better.
I think people are definitely craving to see more authenticity and you providing a place for people to get vulnerable, because I think people are learning that that's an important trait to foster. If we can get vulnerable with each other, it's just much more easy to recognize the humanity in each other. I learned something very cool from you in the one class I was able to go to, where you had us write a poem of sorts, where we were writing lines with the little prompt that you gave us. And then you had everybody change their name on Zoom to, it was like just a dot or something. So that then when we shared in the chat, you couldn't tell who it was from. And I thought that is genius, because I would totally have been someone that would not share, because I am the consummate introvert. So I was able to share what I wrote without anybody knowing it was me.
Yeah.
And there was so many beautiful things shared, and perhaps some of those things wouldn't have been shared if they had to keep their name up. So it was lovely. And I've shared it with quite a few groups since then. I'm like, oh, you could try this.
I can't take credit. A friend told me about this, and I also was like, brilliant that way. Yeah, because it's so hard to put yourself out there in a group where you don't necessarily know the other people or have had the time to build the trust with them. And yet, just like you said, when we put ourselves out there and share, collectively, we see ourselves in other people and we can feel the safety of that build. So not being anonymous, I think, can be such a powerful way of being able to hear other people's voices, like you said, that might not have shared.
Yeah. And then I was going to go back to your murals you do with your community. And so people actually get to paint with you. Do you?
Yeah, I've done, so one of the ones that was so fun that I did during the pandemic is there's this amazing organization here in San Francisco called Paint the Void that has been taking all these boarded up storefronts, because so many of the restaurants, et cetera, got boarded up right after, the pandemic started. And so they've been contracting artists from all the different neighborhoods around San Francisco to come and paint them. So we did a project at Zuni restaurant on Market Street where a group of ER doctors actually wanted to do a community building event and came to paint. So I designed the mural and based on their thoughts on what they wanted the mural to be. And then they came and I painted the outline, and then they came and painted during this amazing paint day. And it was so fun to see all these people who I hold in such esteem. These are the doctors who are on the front lines here, right? And they're showing up and saying, "Oh, I've never painted before. How do I do this?" And I'm like, "Well, you're a surgeon. I'm sure." I tried to put the surgeons on the detail work and coordinate that. But yeah, I've done murals I did a really fun mural in a transitional housing community where folks had been formerly living on the streets who came together and had ideas on how, the mural that they wanted in their community room. And many of them had never painted before. And then some of them were, amazing artists who had been painting their entire lives. So just trying to find ways, I think, a mural is kind of like an orchestra, right? Of figuring out where people want to show up and how they can show up, but there's really a way that everyone can be part of it.
That is so special. I love that. That's truly beautiful. And the building of community for those, what an experience to do that together, like the doctors who are in the thick of it, and then people that have struggled with homelessness. Those are big things in our communities. I live in Southern California. Homelessness is a serious issue down here right now, which in light of everything that's going on, it's got to be extra challenging.
Yeah. So many important ways to think about community in general. I think it can be when we get overwhelmed with all the specifics of our own individual lives and our own individual fears. And, am I safe? Is my family safe? And really thinking expansively about, my community and who are the people who are most vulnerable and how do we keep showing up for them?
It's huge right now. What are your thoughts? If there's someone that feels like they don't have a connection to their community, what ways would you suggest them finding that?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think for me, the first thing I think that is helpful to do is to just kind of take stock of, your immediate situation of like, okay, where do I live? Because to me, one of the projects I do in the classes is it's like everyone lives somewhere, figuring out who is physically nearby, and that is one form of community. And some people connect with those who are physically close by, and some people don't. And I think there's some ways that you can build those connections, first of all, by being open to them and thinking intentionally about them. And then I think, thinking about the other aspects of your identity, right? Because community is so tied to who our identities are. So, there's maybe your kid's school has a community, and that's one place that people tap in. Maybe you have a religious community. I know family is a complicated one for a lot of people where they don't necessarily want to be connected to their family community, but sometimes, putting effort into those connections can be very, fruitful as well. I do think that online communities can be a really powerful connective place for people, especially if you feel really isolated in a lot of other areas of your life. There's so many groups out there now that are so specific that I think it allows you to find people who are in a similar situation. But I do think a lot of it, and we talk about this in the class, a lot of community has to do with you really knowing yourself of like, what is important to me? What are my values? What are my identities? And then thinking about the types of people that maybe share those identities or maybe don't. Because I think there's some really amazing, powerful communities that are built when a lot of people come together who have a lot of differences. And a friend of mine just wrote this amazing book called Learning in Public. It's by Courtney Martin. And she talks a lot about a school community that, her daughter, she lives in Oakland, and her daughter started kindergarten 2 years ago. And she talks about building the community that they're building at the school, and the challenge of figuring out what school to send your child to, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of different ways to tap into, communities where people are really different from one another and still have it be a really powerful experience for all.
That's a good point. I liked what you said about figuring out who you are and what's important to you, which is something that happened to me early in the pandemic. Of we spend so much time on autopilot, working, getting the kids to school, dinner, just on that cycle constantly, and you don't really have the time to think. And then when you are faced with something like this and forced to slow down and be like, what have I been doing for the past 30 years? I also was in transition because my kids are grown and I'm in the empty-ish nest, I call it. They're still here. Well, my daughter's home for school break. She'll be leaving again next week, but my son is still here. But they're grown. Yeah. They don't need me. I tell my son all the time, we're roommates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just figuring out that, okay, what does that mean for me now? Like there were times in my life where I was questioning, like, should I really be doing this job? It's not very fulfilling. I don't feel like I'm really giving much to the world with this, but I was a single mom. So you have to take care of business. And then when you're like, oh, wait, well, I don't have to do that anymore. I just have to take care of myself now. So what do I really want to do? What is that? And then being more, like you said, with the intention.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that's not working. This is what I want to work. So intentionally thinking everything I'm doing, is that moving me towards this or is it moving me towards that? And I feel like for me, who has always been a super indecisive person, it helps you make decisions because it brings so much more clarity. And I hear so many people talking about wanting to make those big changes because I feel like we all know we can do better. We want to do better in so many areas of our society that are struggling. But you get stuck in the like, well, how? And I think that's such a huge part is that first building the community, finding the other people that are interested in making those changes too, and then kind of breaking it down into the steps of like, we all want to get there. How do we do that? Well, let's figure it out together. Being able to be vulnerable and ask the stupid questions and know that you're coming from a good place and trust the other people not to ostracize you because you've said something incorrectly in your desire to learn, because we're all trying to learn how this new world might work. Little backstory. I was originally asking at the end of the interview, what would you like to normalize? in our new society. But I have since come to the realization that normal isn't really a good thing. Like, we don't necessarily want to normalize things, because normal leads you to think that this is good and that's bad. And then that's always leads to being exclusive. And I want this new world, air quote, normal, to be inclusive. So I'm struggling with, well, how do I ask that question? What do you want to see more of in our world going forward?
That's such a great question. Well, the thing that immediately comes to mind is creativity. I want to see more space for creativity, more funds for creativity, more emphasis on creativity, more appreciation for creativity. Yeah, I think we often don't value what it can bring to our lives. And as a society, I think, art classes get cut, and I'm like, no, it's not about painting the apples. It's about learning how to think outside of the box. It's about figuring out our, what we have to say, who we are. I think it's just, there's so much tied in there that can benefit us in every other thing we do. I don't think that everybody should grow up and be an artist. It's actually very challenging, but I do think I want there to be more space that every person gets a chance to explore their creative self. That I think would make it a better world. And I think there's a real, discrepancy in privilege connected to who gets to explore their creativity and who doesn't.
I love, love, love that answer. And you're so right. It's not just about painting the apple. I mean, we have some sincerely and extremely complicated problems that we need to solve. We need people that are able to think outside the box, think creatively, and find solutions to how we are going to get through all of this, the climate, the virus, the wars, the not wars, it's a mess, and we need some creative people to help us figure it out.
We do. There's so many great ideas out there. I just, it's so exciting to find people who are doing that outside of the box thinking. There's a podcast I'm so excited about called How to Save a Planet. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
I'm writing it down.
It's so good, but it's all about these brilliant creative solutions to climate justice issues. And it's so well done. Highly suggest.
I'm struggling with because I built an e-commerce store to support the podcast because I still have to operate in this capitalist society. But I'm like, I don't want to sell things.
Yeah.
Like, there's too many things in the world.
Yes.
So I'm definitely struggling with that aspect of it. But I'm hoping in the next year to build a more community-based support for the podcast and maybe get away from selling things.
Oh, yes. I have an online store as well. And it's such a challenge for me as well. And the way I've kind of tried to navigate it is, I use all eco-friendly packaging. And then I also am trying to figure out how to print my stuff on things that people need anyway, grocery shopping bags. What are the things that are already going to be purchased? And how do I ensure that they're printed on, renewable, eco-friendly stuff? Yeah.
Doing similar things. And I noticed your tote was 100% organic.
Yes. It's so hard because then people ask me to do wholesale and I'm like, the prices are not going to allow for you to sell this in your store. I can do it on my own online store, but otherwise it's challenging. Yeah.
That's the same because I've been looking to partner with companies that are, socially responsible and environmentally responsible and looking for all that stuff. And we just do the best we can.
Yeah.
Is all we can do, right?
It's so true. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been a pleasure. And now I'm even more of a fangirl.
Yes. Yeah. No, anytime. I was so excited to hear about your podcast. Also, I didn't know about it yet. So
no, because I'm still hiding. It's literally been, I thought of the idea in probably April of 2020.
Oh, really?
And I've been running away and to it for like a year and a half now, because like I said, I am a consummate introvert. Like,
Yeah.
don't look at me, don't talk to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea of me having a podcast is just poof. So it's taken me a while to come to terms, and the imposter syndrome issues that come up, and just to start talking about this, because as the more I talk about it, and I'm getting such good feedback from, it's really wanted. Like, people want to connect, and people do want to make changes and do things better. I mean, especially in our country, how crazy the past 5 years have been. We're all craving something better. What that is, I think most of us don't know how to get to, but the more we talk about it is probably the only way we're actually going to get to it. So.
Yes. Oh man, it's so hard. It's so hard to put yourself out there too. I could never do a podcast. I'm so impressed.
I have not. I probably have 8 interviews recorded, and I haven't been able to bring myself to listen to any of them. So next week is all editing. Yeah. And I just told myself, okay, Debbie, you are going to make a complete fool of yourself several times before you get this right. Just get used to it.
Well, and I think the powerful thing, because I launched my class fall of 2020, a year ago now. And I was so nervous, and I was like, what am I doing? And all the things. And then once the class started, all these people were so, they have their own interpretations. And I think putting it out into the world is a really helpful piece of that, because then you see, wow, I did my piece, and then this is really having an impact on people. And so it gives you the motivation to keep going and keep doing the hard parts.
It feels good. Like, when I used to love to be creative, and somewhere along the way, you lost the time for it. And one of the things this past year of the self-reflection and trying to figure it out was the journaling more, and the taking the time to just be creative, whatever that meant, whether I was going to bake something or draw something or make face masks with fun fabric that I had in the attic, it reminded me, like, oh yeah, this feels good. This is why they do this in rehab.
Yeah, totally. Yes, exactly. It's so true. It's good for all of us.
This has been great. Thank you.
Well, I hope you'll stay connected. It would be great to talk more. It sounds like we have a lot of similarities and a lot of similar values about what we're trying to do.
Definitely. Let's go change the world.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our show. If you enjoyed what you heard, feel free to subscribe and leave us a review. If you didn't enjoy what you heard, reach out to us. Let us know how we can make it better. This show is really about all of us, not just me and my guests, but how can we all make this world a little better? If you'd like to connect with us, you can follow us on Instagram. We have a free Facebook community. And if you'd like to show more support, you can check out our intentional apparel shop online, New World Intentions. You'll find t-shirts, hats, totes, all with positive messaging to help you move mindfully through your day and help create that new world normal. Some things we talked about: the importance of community, connecting with people that are having the conversations that you want to have. You might do that in your neighborhood, in organizations that you already belong to, or reach out on social media. Facebook has a plethora of very specific groups, so you can find anybody interested in just about anything and connect with people all over the world. Other thing discussed in this episode was the importance of being creative and giving yourself time and space to let your brain play in ways that it doesn't normally get to, whether you're going to draw or to paint or to bake something or to write. Being creative is so much more than just the painting or the drawing or the meal that you've prepared. It's important to let yourself play, to break out of those norms that we all operate in and do something differently and see how that feels. To wrap up, I'd love to thank Jen Bloomer of Radici Studios for joining us, and be sure to check the show notes for links on how you can connect with her and go show her some love. Jen also has some free downloadable coloring pages that you might enjoy, one of which I believe is the graphic that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please come back next week when we will be talking with James, the trans coach.